everyone, and welcome to this month's Support Coordinator webinar. I'm Vicky Gray, your host for today's session, which is proudly brought to you by Endeavour Foundation. As this is our last webinar for 2024, we're excited to end the year with a deep dive into building participant capacity, featuring our guest presenter, Mary Ingerton from Support Coordination Academy. As we gather online with attendees joining us from across Australia, I'd like to acknowledge the significance of the lands we call home. If you'd like to honour the traditional custodians of the lands you're logging in from, feel free to share the name in the chat. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Gubbi Gubbi people, traditional custodians of the land on which I'm hosting from today. In the spirit of reconciliation, Endeavour Foundation acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Now, before we dive in, let's quickly go over some housekeeping. Your microphones and cameras will remain off throughout the webinar, but we encourage you to connect with your fellow attendees in the chat to share insights about today's topic. If you have any questions for Mary, please add them to the Q&A section so we can address them after Mary's presentation in the Q&A session. You'll also find a link to our privacy policy in the chat. If you have any questions about that, please feel free just to reach out. And finally, before introducing our speakers, I'd like to point you in the direction of the recordings of our webinar series. Now, throughout the year, these webinars have been packed with valuable information, strategies and tips covering a wide range of topics. These recordings are now available on our YouTube channel, so please check out the link in the chat and start exploring. As mentioned earlier, during this webinar, we'll dive into the topic of building participant capacity. Our presenter today is Mary Ingerton from Support Coordination Academy. Shortly, Mary will be covering strategies for empowering participants to make informed choices, essential qualities to seek in leading service providers, and proven methods for guiding participants through the provider selection journey. Now, before handing you over to Mary, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Shania Brennan. Shania is the Business Improvement Specialist at Endeavour Foundation and leads a team of social workers and disability specialists advocating for our clients. Over to you, Shania.
Thank you, Vicky, and hello, everybody. It is wonderful to be here with you all today. So as Vicky mentioned, I work at Endeavour Foundation and I lead two teams that both advocate for people with disabilities in the change of situation space and our intake and inquiry space. So as Vicky just mentioned, today we'll be talking about building participant capacity. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how Endeavour supports our participants within this space. So as you can see here on the slide, we have many different avenues of how we will work with participants around building their capacity. And that kind of stemmed in the community access space and also about how we might navigate conversations and how our staff are trained to deliver supports as well. So I'll go through what's on the slide here. Sorry, I lost my spot. So we've got our learning and lifestyle centres, which are our day programs, and they promote social inclusion, activities and centred around capacity building. So each of our centres, they have a wide range of activities that our participants can engage in around cooking classes, community access, gardening, arts and craft, and so much more. A wonderful example of a capacity building activity that I love to talk about is one of our centres in Queensland. They get love to get very involved in Halloween every year. So at this centre, one of their year-long activities in the build-up to Halloween is that the participants that are interested, they engage in scripting, filming, and production of a Halloween-themed movie. They do a big premiere on Halloween, and it's just such a wonderful event. You really see the participants get involved. They love to be a part of writing the scripts, choosing the costumes, actually acting in the film itself, and you can see how proud they are during the premiere of how it turns out. Some of the other programs that we do offer around capacity building are our Thrive Learning program, which was designed by Endeavour, and it's a program that supports people with a disability to build confidence, pursue their interests, and develop their skills in finding and maintaining employment, nurturing healthy relationships, and building independence at work and home. The cool thing about one of these programs is that it can be delivered through different modalities. So it can be delivered in person, it can be delivered online. We also have our community access, supported employment, and in-home support options as well, all which focus on building participant capacity in an individualised setting. So those are some of the programs that we have. How do we navigate capacity building for our participants? How do we include them in that process as well? So we have our individualised support plans, which are a collaborative support plan working with the participant and their support network to talk through their goals, how we're going to achieve them together. And then we also have, I guess, a big part of informed decision making is about meeting a participant where they're at. So making sure that when we need to communicate with a participant and make sure that they are understanding everything and can make that informed decision, that we're understanding what their communication needs are and making sure we really break down all information that we need to communicate with them to be able to make that informed decision. Lastly, I just wanted to also touch on one of the training programs that we deliver to our staff, which is around active support. And the core of this is capacity building. So it's a support model for our staff to ensure that opportunities are created for our participants. So that's engaging in those meaningful activities, participating fully in their community, and then ultimately being able to exercise informed decision making. So that's just a brief snapshot of how Endeavour approach capacity building. There's lots more information there, but I know that Mary is going to really dive into what this can look like as well. So I'll hand over to you now, Mary. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for coming. And again, this is the last webinar for the year. So I'm sure everyone's getting ready for Christmas break or some kind of holidays coming up. Okay, so I'm Mary from Support Coordination Academy. So we deliver training, coaching, all that kind of thing, and we specialise in everything to do with support coordination. So what today is I'm going to really focus around the support coordinator role. So talking about building capacity in relation to the role of a support coordinator. Okay, here we go. Okay, so something just to note that when I talk about a participant, I'm actually referring more holistically in relation to the participant themselves, but also it could be their nominee, family member, carer, or whoever that might be. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, we're going to have a look at the capacity building approach. So as a support coordinator, support coordination is has a capacity building focus. The role was created to be a capacity building role. So this is specifically where I'm coming from. So someone often says to me, oh, is it something else that we need to do? Or is it another responsibility or part of our role? Think about capacity building as a lens that you look through or an approach that you use, a practice framework. So it influences everything that you do and your approach and the way that you work with participants. So just want to put that out there up front. Okay, so let's have a look at a capacity building approach. So a capacity building approach when working with a person with disability focuses on empowering the individual by enhancing their skills, developing their support systems and networks or stakeholder groups, promoting their independence and increasing the participants' participation and quality of life. So those are kind of the outcomes that you're wanting to achieve in relation to building that a capacity building approach or using that practice framework. Okay, so what I wanted to make the session today quite practical. So I'm just going to go really delve into strategies that you use to do that in every kind of section that we're working on. So let's have a look at when you're working with a participant, what are some of the strategies that you use to build a participant's capacity? So first of all, and I always say to this to people often say to me, how do I unpack a plan, or what are the things that I need to focus on first? So this is what we cover within our support coordination training. So the first place that you need to start with is around identifying a person's strengths and their goals. So starting with understanding the person's strengths, their interests, their passions, and the things that they want to achieve in their life. So what are their personal goals? What are the things that they want to do? And by that, it really helps you to especially understand and build that rapport with someone, but it also helps you to identify the outcomes and what you're actually working towards. So it's about focusing on a person's abilities. So not solely focusing on a person's limitations, but recognizing and building upon their unique abilities and collaborating directly with the person to set realistic and achievable goals that align with their ambitions and the outcomes that they want to achieve. So making those goals, having that really good conversation with someone around, so what are your goals? What do they mean to you? That person-centered planning and allowing and enabling that person to have ownership of their own goals. So through the planning process with a planner or the NDIS, when they first come into the scheme, often people, I've actually found you go and talk to them about their plans and they often say, I don't even know what those goals mean to me. But really breaking them down and having been inquisitive and having that conversation. So what do those goals mean to you? What is it that you'd like to achieve? I'm working with you. What can we work towards? What does that mean to you? What are the outcomes? What would that look like when we've achieved those goals? So it really helps you and the person to have ownership and actually work towards a goal. So we build capacity by developing skills and providing information to build a person's knowledge base. So working with the person and their community to remove barriers that limit access to resources, participation, or services. So this includes improving accessibility to like physical spaces, improving access to technology, so information on the internet or technology through apps or computer software, improving technical skills, so working with a person to actually link into programs that improve their technical skills, communication and transportation. So it's really thinking about building capacity when you're working with someone and they might have a goal around, say, for example, volunteering or being more inclusive within their community, thinking about the skill set that they may need and then linking them in with those supports and services to increase their skills and their knowledge, which in turn increases their confidence. So encouraging inclusive practices and raising awareness around disability rights and aiming for or setting up really good supportive and inclusive environments. So they're with the services that you're researching. So when you're researching services, really having a look at inclusivity. What does that look like? What's their accessibility like? So really supporting a person to be able to ask some of these questions. Okay. And creating in 1 minute. Here we go. So building self-advocacy skills. This is a really, really part of the building capacity or the capacity building focus. So empowering individuals to advocate for themselves by teaching communication and self-advocacy skills. So that's that mentoring or that coaching. So when someone comes to you and they might be asking you some questions around, they might be having some issues or some challenges, really talking with the person and building their confidence to problem solve. So what would you do in that situation and how would you manage that? And what are some of the things that we need to think of? So it's really empowering the individual to actually advocate for themselves. This might include understanding their rights, learning negotiation skills, or building confidence to express their needs and preferences. And we'll talk a lot more about breaking that down, especially when you're looking for service providers or supporting a participant to understand what quality service provision looks like. So self-advocacy actually promotes independence and helps a person feel more in control of their own life. Okay, so fostering support networks, encouraging connections with family, friends, peer groups, and community organisations. So a strong support network provides encouragement. It helps them to access additional resources and opens up opportunities for participation. Mentorship programs or peer support networks or groups are really effective ways to offer ongoing support and guidance from others who have shared experiences the same as that person. So we know, I know when I talk to people about some of the challenges that I have, when someone's had the same experience and you can talk it through, you kind of feel like, oh, well, I'm not alone, or that's a really nice way to be able to deal with that. So peer support groups or setting up groups that actually they can actually talk through someone who's actually experienced the same things that they have. Okay, so these are all just really good strategies around building capacity. So encouraging active participation and leadership. This is really, really important. Encouraging connections with family, friends, and peer group. Involving the person in decision-making processes related to their life and activities. So really encouraging that problem solving and taking the time to go, building those skills around problem solving so that they are the leaders in their own lives. So this participation helps a person to gain confidence and take ownership of their own journey, and they can see the positive impact of their own contribution. So they actually feel valued, that they have some control and they're actually important in those part of those conversations. So wherever possible, encouraging leadership opportunities, which can help in building self-esteem, but also visibility within the community. So in summary, by focusing on a capacity building approach, you empower individuals with disabilities to make meaningful choices, to engage actively in their communities and realise their potential. So not all people with disability have actually had that opportunity to realise their potential or actually feel valued within their community. So this approach not only supports a person's growth, but it also fosters a more inclusive society in general. Okay, so we'll move on. Okay, now we're going to have a look at focusing on some strategies to help participants make informed choices, which is really, really important. So there's a whole policy behind informed decision making. If you want some more in-depth training or information around informed decision making or how you can support people to make informed choices, especially with people with an intellectual disability or intellectual impairment, National Disability Services or NDS have some really good training, but also some really good material around this. Okay, so using a capacity building approach to help participants with disability make informed choices about their supports and services involves guiding them to understand, assess, and decide what best suits their own needs and choose the supports and services that are beneficial to them. Okay, so it's guiding a participant to understand, assess, decide, and choose. Okay, let's have a look at some strategies. So information and education. So offering information about available services and supports in accessible formats. So this could be like plain language, large print, audio, translators, but it ensures the participants can fully understand their options, also explaining their rights and entitlements. So helping participants understand their rights, including the right to choose and customise services. Knowing their entitlements empowers them to make decisions confidently. It's one thing that I find all the time when I'm working with participants and we're negotiating services. It's really about, oh, well, a service provider comes along and says, oh, this is how we do things and this is just what happens and these are the forms that you need to fill in. So I really talk to a participant about, so what do you actually need? And we do a lot of prep up front. What is it actually that you need? What are the questions that you have? What are the things that you want to understand? So really empowering them to take leadership, but also empowering them to be able to ask those questions themselves. because this is their journey and they have a right to ask these questions. Okay. Exploration of options. So sharing a range of support services available and explaining what each one offers. So for instance, highlighting the difference between each service provider and supporting a participant to identify the attributes they need from a service provider to meet their unique support needs. So what specifically do you need from a provider? So the aim here is around supporting a person to make informed decisions, but it's also about setting up that relationship so that it will be more successful. Offering real world examples. So I often find using scenarios. So doing some of that scenario stuff. So what about, so if this kind of happened, how could we do it? Or using scenarios of what's worked really well before, testimonials or case studies, illustrating how different supports have worked for others. And using this contextual information can often make options more relatable and understandable for people. Okay, because sometimes we often there's a lot of acronyms and capacity building, even capacity building alone, that terminology is used so widely in our sector and it means completely different things. So using scenarios or examples are really good ways to get information across to help a person really process it and relate it back to their own situation. Okay, skill building for decision making. So thinking about when you are working with a participant and you're doing that planning, that person-centered planning around how you support a person to work towards or achieve their goals, their outcomes, you're thinking about the outcomes that you want to achieve. So often if you're planning around the goals and then you're identifying what the outcomes would look like, it really helps you to measure progress, which is really good for your reporting. But it also helps you to come back and go, well, if these are the goals and these are the outcomes, what are the steps that we need to take to be able to achieve those outcomes? Yeah. And that could be short term, they could be aspirational over 2 or 3 years. It's not about the time that it takes, it's about the steps at the person's pace that needs to happen to support that person to get to where they want to be. Okay, so skill building for decision making. So thinking about what are the skills that the person will need to be able to work towards. So think about, for example, so I suppose for an example, I was working with a person who had a psychosocial disability, which impacted them a major challenges in a number of areas due to the impact of their disability. And so their goal was around gaining employment. And they'd never really been able to hold down a job. And so we kind of did a lot of work and exploration around what worked well, what didn't work well, what are the things that, what would your employment look like? What does it mean to you? So really trying to get really drilling down, but also understanding where were the skill gaps? How can we increase this person's skills and affect confidence as well and knowledge to be able, so that the next time they step back out to that workforce, they're feeling more confident and there's more higher chance of that being successful. So linking a participant into training or therapy supports that can help them develop the skills like weighing up the pros and cons, setting priorities, and considering short and longer term outcomes. So breaking down those goals into more achievable steps. Introducing decision-making tools. So there's some amazing person-centered tools and decision-making tools that you can research. So using tools such as decision matrices or using visual aids or guided question lists that simplify complex choices and provide a structure for evaluating options. So really breaking down complex questions or complex decision-making down into more achievable steps. Facilitated discussions and guidance. So encouraging self-reflection. So facilitating discussions that help participants reflect on their own goals, their preferences, and their personal values. And this is a really good thing to do throughout. So you might have been working with a participant for 6 months, the 6 month mark, you might come back and say, let's go back and have a reflection on what's worked really well, what hasn't worked really well. How did that make you feel? Did you feel like you're more confident now? So we use what we call a confidence scale, and that really helps you to measure a person's confidence over time. It also helps to measure and really evidence the support that you've provided to a participant. Okay. Where are we up to? So offering a safe space where a participant feels that they can ask questions. So making sure you really build that rapport with a participant, that they feel they can voice their concerns, they can process the information that they've been provided, and they can ask questions. Yeah. So really setting up that safe environment. This helps to clarify any confusion, and it helps to build a person's confidence in making decisions. So peer support and mentorship. So introducing participants to others who have similar experiences and having navigated the process of selecting services. So peer mentors can offer first-hand insights, share strategies, and answer questions. And if you're working with a number of participants on your caseloads that might have common support needs or experiencing common challenges in selecting providers, one way that I've actually done it is got consent and permission to actually link them together and organise some online sessions where we can actually discuss options, share advice, and just some experience and recommendations for each other. So setting up that kind of network type of thing. Okay. Trial periods and feedback loops. So this is a process that I found really, really helpful. I've found with some participants that every time they go into a new service that it constantly just breaks down. So one strategy that I've always used is encouraging trial periods. So really saying this is just a short-term thing. We're just going to trial this out. We're just going to see how it goes. Then we're going to come back and review it and see what works, what doesn't work. We're going to constantly do that reflection and review and update. And I found that that's been a lot better. Some of the people that I've worked with don't tend to get so over anxious or really, really concerned when they're locked into something. So it's really giving someone an out, but also we're continually learning about what really works for that person. So when possible, suggesting trial periods for services so participants can experience them firsthand before making a long-term commitment. So implementing regular check-ins, very, very important for support coordination. Scheduling regular check-ins to review the effectiveness of the supports that they've chosen. So if a participant finds their choice isn't meeting their needs, then helping them to reassess and adjust their supports. And it's really coming back to that reflection. So what worked well, what didn't work well, it's really allowing and empowering that person to have responsibility for the choices that they make. Okay. Okay, where am I up to? I think I might have gone too far. Trial periods. Okay, here we go. The other thing is using technology for decision making. How are we going for time? Pretty good. Okay, so researching some apps or online tools that are designed to help people with disability assess and choose services. Introducing these can offer an interactive and personalised way to explore options. Or again, visual planning tools. So visual tools like an organising app or using calendars to actually plan out supports and services can really help people to actually have a more structured way or a visual way to plan for things and make decisions. And then fostering self-advocacy. So encouraging participants to voice their preferences, ask questions and assert choices. So again, it's coming back to empowering person to have a voice. And then developing their communication skills for those who need assistance with communication, focusing on building those skills. So how can you link in supports and services to really enhance their skills around communication? Is it around speech therapy? Is it around occupational therapy? Or is it around specific programs around skill development? So building confidence, having being able to use your voice or have influence, really good communication skills. So coming back to the basics. Okay, so we're going to go back here. So using these strategies and a capacity building approach guides participants towards informed decision making by enhancing their understanding, their autonomy, and confidence in choosing services and supports and services that fit their best needs. Okay, so we've talked about the capacity building approach, and we've talked about supporting a person to make informed choices. Okay, now we're going to have a look at strategies to identify quality service providers. And this is a question that I get all the time. So support coordinators play a very crucial role in supporting a person with a disability to understand what a quality service provider looks like. And we often start that process when we engage with a person. So if we're able to engage in a person and they get a really positive experience out of that, so the signing the service agreement, explaining the service agreement, encouraging them to ask questions, to provide feedback, but also through our coaching that we do as part of that implementation period. Once we're linking in supports, and we're doing that coaching, refining, reviewing, checking in, supporting person to reflect. So that really is supporting a person to really start to develop those skills and empowering them to make those informed choices, but also to ask questions. That they have a right to actually ask questions, and to ask questions specific in relation to their own needs. Okay, so let's have a look at some strategies around identifying quality service providers. So again, facilitating self-reflection and goal setting. So you can see some really common themes coming through this. Okay, so again, once you've asked a person around their goals and their preferences, it really helps you to understand a person's values. So what do they really, really value? What are the things that are really important to them? So really asking them things like, what do they hope to achieve by accessing this support? Do they want increased independence? Is it more around social engagement? Is it around skill building? So, and also reflecting on past experiences. So if the participant has worked with other service providers, discussing what they liked or didn't like about those experiences, and highlighting the qualities. So what are the values that that you can see in that, and really reinforcing those values for a participant. Things like reliability or respect or really clear communication. When you break it down to these factors or values for a participant, it really helps them to think about, well, these are the things that I like or that I don't like. And it really helps them to then gain some more insight around why something might not have worked previously. And so it really helps for a participant to communicate when you are negotiating services, but also when they're in a service. So if really good communication is really, really important to them, when you're negotiating those services, these are the values that you can really talk to a service provider about, and it really helps them to understand how to support that person. Okay, a guide on understanding service provider qualities. So providing a list of common qualities. So sharing a list of typical qualities to consider, such as reliability, flexibility, respect, experience, accessibility, cultural competence, specializations like really, really understanding people with intellectual disability or with psychosocial disability, or really understanding a recovery focus. So really drilling down and thinking about the qualities of a service provider. So really helping a participant to really understand what each of those qualities mean, and having them rank them based on what the importance is for them or what the priorities are for them. So again, we have a tool that we use. It's called a Choosing Service Provider tool. And also within our support coordination software, this tool is actually built within the software. So what it actually does is it breaks down these qualities, and it actually helps a participant to understand what qualities they're looking for a service provider, so that when you offer options around service providers, it really helps them to really talk about what qualities that they're actually looking for, and it helps them to rate and prioritize which provider they want to go with. Okay. Exploring values and preferences for support style. So a support style is in relation to the service delivery. So encouraging participants to think about whether they prefer a hands-on approach, they prefer a collaborative approach, or they might the more independent style where they take the lead. Or they might be someone who would rather be just left alone, given something to do, or, you know, everybody has a different way of learning and a different, so it's really thinking about their values, what they value in a provider, thinking about the common qualities that they might be looking for, but also what is the style of a provider. The other thing that's really good to think about when you're looking at service providers, so having these conversations really broadens their understanding of quality service providers. Yeah. So again, we're drilling down, we're looking at different concepts to help a participant really think about what a quality service provider would look like. So again, it's about setting up that relationship, empowering a participant to understand what they might be looking for in a provider. Again, it's about trying to set something up so it might be more successful. Okay, the other thing is identifying what the non-negotiables are. So helping a participant to define the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves. So what are the must-haves? What are the non-negotiables and what are the negotiables in a provider? So that might be around a specific skill set. It might be around availability, so days of week. Are you coming to me? Am I coming to you? It might be around personality traits, so friendliness, patience. It could be around whether the person working with them is a male or a female. It could be an age thing. It could be around cultural awareness. So thinking about the non-negotiables really helps someone to drill that down. Okay. Oops, done. Okay, the next one is encouraging open communication with potential providers. So setting up a meet and greet. So some of the participants that I support, and especially in really, really high complex around specialist support coordination, that is more done, it's quite different for every participant I work with. Some participants really are empowered to set up this process themselves. Others want a more meet and greet. And so it's really about supporting them. They might have a support worker who might actually support them to go and visit some services. So I want to see the physical space and where they're going to go, and then have that meet and greet and see how they feel about that. Other times service providers go and meet with them. So arranging introductory meetings with potential providers so the participant can get a real feel for their style and personality. This direct interaction allows the participant to assess whether the provider's approach aligns with their values, and helping them to prepare a list of questions. So the questions would help them reveal the provider qualities. You know, things like, how do you handle unexpected schedule changes? So if their reliability and communication, think about some questions that they could use around communication. Or how do you support participants in setting and reaching their goals? And so one thing that I always do when I'm supporting participants and I'm negotiating service agreements, I put the goals and we have discussions around how you're going to support person towards achieving those goals. What are the activities or what are the qualities and values that a participant needs? I add those to service agreements. And participants really then feel like the service agreement is theirs, that they've had a voice in it and they have more ownership of it. Okay. So I think we're just about finished. Yes, we are. And we're going really well for time. That's great. So regular check-ins and adjustments. This is really, really important. So after working with a provider for some time, checking in to see if the provider is meeting the participant's expectations. So this can reveal additional qualities that are important to the participant, which might not have initially been considered. So again, that's that reflection piece. So checking in to go, okay, so how's it going? So we had these qualities, we talked about the style, we talked about your values. Is there anything else that you're noticing now that you're really picking up on that you really, really like about this provider? And let's add them to that list. So what you're doing is actually building this library for the participant. It's actually building a worldview for the participant as well around quality providers that they can actually use themselves. And it builds their confidence to then in the future be able to go through that process more independently. So encouraging flexibility in the reevaluation. So letting the participants know that they can always adjust their criteria over time as they understand more about what they value in a provider. So going back, reflecting, reviewing, understanding lessons learned, and then updating that information for them so that they have that and that's something that they can actually refer to quite often. Okay, so by guiding a participant through these steps, a support coordinator can help them identify the qualities they seek in service providers, ensuring a participant's choice and control aligns with their values, needs, and aspirations. Okay, I'm actually finished. So we are actually going to go to some Q&A, and we've got around 20 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to go to the Q&A section. Hopefully it opens. Yes, it opens. Okay, here we go. So Karen, I'm just going to start from the top. So I'm interested in how to record if a participant has chosen to take multiple services from our provider business. What is the best way to record this choice the participant has made to take 2 or 3 different services from our provider business? Okay, so I'm assuming what you're talking about is that you're a support coordinator and the organisation that you work for has other services as well. And okay, so this is really close to the topic of conflict of interest. So you would have seen that the NDIA has just put out a lot of information around conflict of interest. So I would very, very strongly suggest that you get onto the NDIS website and go and have a look at it around conflict of interest. They've got a whole statement around it and everything. So conflict of interest, it's really about you really need to be able to evidence how you provided the participant with choice and control. So how have you gone through that process that I've just talked about? You've broken it down, you understand the qualities, the values, the type of support that they're looking for, really understand what the person is looking for. You've then gone and done your research based on that criteria. And then if one of the services from your organisation meets that criteria, then you then need to sit down with a participant, offering them at least 3 options. And one of them might be your service. Then you're actually then documenting, sitting down with a participant or having the communication with a participant and going through and really helping them to explore based on their own criteria, what are the pros and cons. And the participant makes a choice about who they want to go with. Yeah. And I've talked about this before. So it's really, if you're living in a place like Brisbane or in your city, you have more choice. If you live in rural and remote, you don't often have that variety of choice. So it's really with conflict of interest, you need to document. And also the NDIS has really introduced a conflict of interest form as well. So it's really about documenting within your service agreements that you are acknowledging that you are an organisation as a support coordinator, and you're also sitting with an organisation where other services. You're already acknowledging that that's a conflict of interest and clearly detailing the process that you will follow to manage that conflict of interest. But you need to be able to evidence it very, very clearly. Hopefully I have, as part of our support coordination software, we have the choosing service provider tool within the software that clearly documents the process that you go through, as well as how you've offered a participant choice and control. Okay, so it really helps you to manage that conflict of interest. Okay, scrolling here. In regards to trialling of providers before locking in for long-term engagement, how do you get around provider service agreements? Ceasing supports, which usually occurs a 2 weeks notice if the participant wishes to cease sooner. Okay, I think there's 2 questions there. In relation to trialling providers, it depends on the provider. So if I'm working with participants and it might be a program that they can go along to, like a skill development program, I always talk to the provider about, I really want to set this up for success. The participant is really keen to come along and have a look. And I've often had success where they can come in and sit for a couple of hours with the support worker and just get a feel for it. And then we come back and we have discussions. So that's kind of how I've trialed it. In relation to therapy sessions, what I've often done, especially with speech therapy or physiotherapy or psychology, I've actually set up the agreement. So I might have an initial agreement that says, we are going to, so we've really, again, gone through the process of understanding the qualities, the experience, all those factors. We've drilled down in relation to that person's unique support needs, matched that to the provider that they needed. The participant has chosen which provider they want to go with. And then what we've done is we've set up an initial service agreement that basically says this arrangement is for a maximum of 6 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever we've negotiated. And in that time, we are going to do an assessment process. And this is what, and we negotiate what that assessment's going to look like and what the outcome of that assessment will be, like a report, a structured report, not a major report, just a minimum report. And also it might be about, we will negotiate what goals or what activities we're going to be doing within that 6-week period. And then the participant then really has a choice about whether they want to continue with that service. But it really helps then for that participant to kind of think about, are they in, are they out, do they really like that style, what do they like or what don't they like? But it also helps us to then come back and renegotiate. Okay, so they really like this part of it, but they would really like additional things around this. So it really just helps the person with disability and the person that I'm working with, especially if they haven't had really good experiences, to have control and feel like they have a say in what the service provision is going to look like. Okay, ceasing supports, which usually occur a 2-week notice if the participant wishes to cease sooner. Okay, so when a participant signs a service agreement, a service agreement is not a contractual relationship. You need to understand that. It's an agreement about each person's responsibility. Okay, it's not a legal contract. So when a participant is signing an agreement, they do that in good faith. So it's really about making really, really clear that a participant understands that if you want to cease this service, there's a requirement to actually provide 2 weeks notice, and explaining why, getting the provider to explain why. What is the 2 weeks notice? I've seen agreements that I've had provided or negotiated, and they've had 4 weeks, and I've said to them why, like explain to me and the participant why you've got 4 weeks, because to me that seems unreasonable. If someone doesn't want to be in your service, and I suppose the other thing too is to negotiate, to really talk about a participant. If you've got a participant who constantly breaking down with services, that's just not going well, you need to be stepping back and understanding why. What are the factors? What are the influences that creating this breakdown in supports? You need to actually not just keep going through the same process. You need to be stepping back, reflecting and going, why does this keep happening? But it's really about a person understanding and taking responsibility for, when you sign that, this is what it means. So, and being able to negotiate that. The other thing is that a cancellation notice is really about, I want to change your service and go to another service. That's completely different to if a service breaks down because of something that the service provider's done that's unethical, breach of the code of conduct. That's a completely different situation. So it's really about coming about and really talking to the participant about what that's about. Hopefully that will help. Happy for you to email me, info@SC Academy, if you want to explore that further. Do you also do level 3 training too in group for provider? Are you talking about specialist support coordination? You're talking about more skill development? We do foundational introduction. So once you understand the foundations, we then start to do practice. So introducing concepts around professional skill development, understanding practice and what that means more in depth, understanding the complexity. So how do you unpack complexity? How do you identify the factors that create barriers, which then leads to risk? How do you evidence that? How do you manage that? And how do you report that to the NDIS, which then supports you then to request level 3, or really supports you to get the supports that the person needs, basically. We've actually developed training for level 3 support coordination. So if you are interested in it, email me. We can talk further. Can you please give us some recommendations on these tools? Show 3 comments. Okay. Get copies of slides. You also level 3 training. Okay, that's all good. Tools. I'm not quite sure which tools you're referring for. Again, can you please email me with more detail? When I'm talking about tools, I'm I'm a partner of support coordination software with 2 other partners. We built our support coordination toolkit, which we developed as part of Support Coordination Academy, which is a paper-based toolkit. We built those tools into our software, so they're all automated. Plan unpacking guide, choosing provider tool, confidence scale, action plans, risk assessments. So they're all inbuilt within the tool. So it helps you to actually guide your practice and evidence how you supported a participant. Hopefully that's what you're talking about. Anyway, email me if you want to talk more about it. We've got 10 minutes left. Were there any other questions? New posts? Okay, going up the top. I'm a support coordinator working under a service provider. I fill out a conflict of interest form with 3 options with participants. Is this sufficient in terms of record keeping? Yeah. You also need to be able to be putting, it's not as easy as filling out a form. Think about your practice, but also think about how you're evidencing. Anyone can fill out a form. Yeah. Think about the process that you use, and you need to document the process that you use within your case notes. So if you had a complaint or you're being audited and an auditor is looking around how you've managed conflict of interest, they can see your conflict of interest form, but you've also explained the process that you've used. Yeah. Okay. What is the best way to deal with a family member who has decided to try to take over decision making for a participant, even though they are not the plan nominee and the participant doesn't have a plan nominee? They are disempowering the participant, have a history of writing letters to NDOs about service providers they aren't happy with. Look, this is a very, very difficult situation. If I was working with a participant in this situation, I would be linking them in with a formal advocate and really talking to the advocate around the concerns, because really it's about the person not being able to make informed decisions for themselves. And the advocate would be able to support the person with those issues. It's what formal advocates do. Okay. How do you deal with participants when they won't respond to phone calls, text messages, and emails, no communication at all, and remote location? I run the NDOs. Look, it's a participant's choice about whether they engage or not. Okay, I'm going to have the last question. It's a participant's choice about whether they engage or not. If a participant chooses not to engage with you, what I've often done is then look at who are their support networks, connecting with their support networks and getting their support networks to talk to them, to then build that relationship, and then maybe having meetings with their support network, so a support worker or a provider, whatever that might be, and then linking in with them. Sometimes it's just too overwhelming, too many people in their lives. Otherwise, it might be just someone who just really is disengaging. So I've also handed clients back to the NDIS when people have consistently disengaged, because people have a choice about whether they engage or not. Okay. If you have any more questions, please email me. Also, I will endeavour to email me with questions and I will respond to them. Okay, go. Take it back.
Taking it back to me. Lovely. Thank you, Mary. As Mary said, if there are any unanswered questions there, we will endeavour to get those answered by Mary and get them sent over to you guys as well. So yeah, Mary, thank you so much for that engaging and insightful presentation. It's clear this topic really resonates with so many of us, and I'm sure everyone here today will walk away with some valuable new insights. Tomorrow you'll all receive an email with the recording of today's session, plus the transcript and the PDF of the presentation as well. So as this is our final webinar for 2024, we'd love to invite you all to join us for our first session of 2025 in February. Our next webinar, Connecting Clients with Meaningful Work, Strategies for Employment Success, will take place on Wednesday, the 12th February. Same time, 12 till 1 AEST. So just check your own time zone to make sure that you're on that same time. And finally, we're currently planning next year's webinar topics, and we would love your input. So please keep an eye out for the email over the next 2 weeks, which is going to invite you to the end of year survey. This is the perfect chance for you guys to have your say about which topics you would like to learn more about. And for those who missed it earlier, we've just reposted the link to the recordings of our entire Support Coordinator webinar series so far on our YouTube channel. So be sure to bookmark the link so you can catch up on the sessions that you may have missed, or you can refresh your knowledge at any time. Also, for those looking to stay informed and further enhance their support efforts, we've also popped the link to our fortnightly Care Connect newsletter in the chat. In that, you can subscribe now to receive valuable updates, insights and resources directly to your inbox. On behalf of Endeavour Foundation, I'd like to thank you all for attending today's webinar and for being part of our sessions throughout this year. Wishing you all a wonderful afternoon and see you all in 2025. Thank you.
Hello everybody, welcome to our Learning and Lifestyle Hub. This is where we make learning fun.
Hi, my name is Andy. I love making Mexican. One day I'm going on MasterChef.
Hi, I'm Grace. I live independently with support when I need it. I live my life my way.
Hi, that's Kevin. I live down here. I like to go to a gym.
Hi, I'm Tricia. I love my life. I got the garbage shop. The high, the good.
I'm Clayton and I love rugby league. I'm normally kicking the footy around in my backyard. This is my home. This is my life. This is my community.
Hi, my name's Jeremy. My daughter's 3 years old. My daughter's proud that I come to work.
I like to go into work.
Hi, I'm Maddie and I work for the Endeavour Foundation. I come to work with a big smile on my face every day.
Love to work here because that's my new family.